When I first saw the Divine Gate in the story trailer for Shadow of the Erdtree, I was both fascinated and horrified. The entire place was made out of corpses, a horrifying yet a somewhat familiar sight. As many of you have already noticed, the base game is full of this theme. Rykard's entire arena as well as his blade is made out of corpses that reminds us a lot of the Divine Gate. But not just him, the Eternal Cities Nokron and Nokstella as well features a ton of corpses. The common factor between all of those different factions is that all of them were trying to make a god. But why? Why is making a god tied with gathering a comical amount of bodies? And who was the first to make this ritual? Going further back in time, we reach Farum Azula, which again is made entirely out of corpses. I believe the Hornsent Divine Gate wasn't the original. The concept of using the spiritual power of corpses to reach divinity is a recurring concept, perhaps as old as the world itself. The Hornsent simply imitated a civilization that made a divine gate, a civilization that had an Elden Lord and succeeded in bringing forth a god. I'm talking about the ancient dragons and Farum Azula. They say history have a habit of repeating itself, and Elden Ring revolves around this concept, the law of causality. But causality is a spiral, not a circle. While some events may appear to reoccur, they do not happen exactly as before. One of the oldest, if not the oldest civilization in Elden Ring is the ancient dragons civilization. Dragons have always been the oldest creatures in the worlds of Miyazaki, immortal and immensely powerful beings as old as the universe itself, but not immune. The dragons eventually fall and a new order emerges. In Elden Ring, we know for sure that Blasidisax, the Dragon Lord, was an Elden Lord. We also know that he had a god that fled at a certain moment in time. After the DLC and the knowledge we received about the Divine Gates, we need to reassess Farum Azula. Just like Enir-Elim, Farum Azula is made entirely from corpses. You may have noticed that the columns of the city is made out of beastmen. You may have also noticed that they are buried inside the walls themselves. But beastmen aren't the only bodies that make up Farum Azula. We can see here that the rocks themselves are made out of ancient dragons. At first glance, you may think that those dragons here just died and got buried in the rocks for some reason. But we can see that those bodies are decomposing. And while this process is taking place, the golden flesh of the ancient dragons is exposed. If we look again, we will find that the entire city is covered with a tinge of gold. I believe this tinge of gold is what remains of decomposed ancient dragons. Let's read the Gravel Stone seal for more context. Sacred seal made from gravel stone, thought to be an ancient dragon scale. We can see here the incredible similarity between the gravel stone and the golden colored stones that make up Farum Azula. There's a problem though. The ancient dragons are actually immortal. Then how did they die and got buried in the rocks? They actually didn't. They willingly sacrificed themselves to make up Farum Azula. Let's read the description of the Dragon Crest talismans. The ancient dragons who ruled in the prehistoric era before the Erdtree would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. We learned from the talisman how far the dragons would go for their lord. They will form a wall of living rock for him. I believe they literally did that, but was it only to protect him? I believe the ancient dragons are the first to make a divine gate. That's how Blasidisax's god ascended to godhood, and that's also how they acquired the Elden Ring, just like Marika. As I said, history repeats itself. In that context, the Hornsent built the tower to imitate Farum Azula and the dragons. We know that the Hornsent were obsessed with divinity and the idea of ascending to godhood. Wouldn't it be logical to try and replicate a civilization that succeeded in doing so? We are even told that the Hornsent studied other civilizations to acquire their knowledge. The description of the Antiquity Scholars Cookbook states the following. a record of crafting techniques left by the Hornsent academics who studied the ancient ruins of Ra. Details techniques for working with sprites so lost to antiquity. So the Hornsent had a habit of learning from other civilizations, and in this case, they tried to imitate the ancient dragons, but they weren't the only ones. Deep underground, we can find another forgotten civilization, a civilization that had close ties to Queen Marika herself, the eternal cities of Nokron and Noxtella. For a long time, those cities remained a mystery for us. Giant skeletons resting eternally on their thrones, huge amount of corpses lying beside them and merged with the buildings, artificial life forms that can shapeshift and can even become you. We can learn that this civilization was trying to make a lord of their own, the Lord of Night. We didn't know the identity of those giant skeletons or why the place is filled with corpses, but I believe we may have solved this mystery. The Nox, in their attempt to make a lord of their own, they also imitated an older civilization, but this time they imitated a civilization closer in time to them, a civilization that gave birth to Marika as we know her, the Hornsent and their divine gate. I believe the Nox were trying to make some kind of a divine gate themselves. At least they were trying to harvest enough spiritual energy from corpses to give life to their man-made lord. This can even be traced back to the ancient dragons. The Nox were trying to make their own immortal dragons. We can see that in the Dragonkin soldiers. They failed in both attempts though, but why? Why did some civilizations succeed in making a divine gateway while others failed? I believe to answer this question, we need to look at the inspiration behind this concept, Berserk. It's no surprise to anyone that Miyazaki is a huge fan of the manga called Berserk. This manga influenced all of his games, where Miyazaki takes a certain concept and put his own twist to it. Elden Ring is no exception. Actually, Elden Ring is the most influenced game that Miyazaki made due to its sheer size. Even the name of the DLC is inspired by Berserk. We can see here the huge similarity between Berserk's Pirate Tree and the Shadow of the Earth Tree. In the manga, there is a ceremony called the Incarnation Ceremony. The Incarnation Ceremony is a sacrificial ceremony where thousands of souls are used as a fuel to give one from the divine domain a physical body. The ceremony is destined to happen through causality every 1000 years. Does that number remind you of something? Well, we will return to it in a minute. During the events of Berserk, the main antagonist Griffith uses this ceremony to give himself a body. The ritual takes place at the Tower of Conviction. Griffith is a god hand, a demonic being of godlike powers, but he can't influence the world physically. That's why he needed the incarnation ceremony. But in order to achieve this, you need a ton of spiritual energy. You can harvest this energy through sacrificing masses of people. Also, there are cases where atrocities and unjust death would result in much greater release of spiritual energy. Having been the site of numerous atrocities, the Tower of Conviction gradually gained an increase of restless spirits, people who died of numerous causes from unjust death to starvation, plague, and disease. This acted as a perfect source for huge amounts of spiritual energy. In this context, we can return back to Elden Ring. Now, as we established, this ritual is revolving around the release of a huge amount of spiritual powers. Spiritual powers can be expressed in several ways in Elden Ring, but perhaps the most apparent is the golden runes we find. Every time we kill an enemy, we get runes, and we can find golden runes alongside corpses. We get stronger variations of golden runes as the corpses become more powerful. In that context, the ancient dragons would have an incredible amount of spiritual energies. They were immortal beings of formidable powers and composed mostly of gold. That's probably why they had no issue with gathering enough spiritual energy for their dragon lord. while in Enir-Elim, the atrocities they committed may have been the reason for the activation of the Divine Gate. We can even see in the story trailer that the corpses was even fresh at that point. Just like the Tower of Conviction in Berserk, the atrocities committed made the spiritual energy released way greater. There is also another theory I have that may explain the betrayal mentioned in the story trailer, but this is a wild one that would make Marika look way worse than she already is. I am currently formulating the theory, so you have to wait for the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, going to the Eternal Cities, they seem to have missed an ingredient. They didn't have enough powers to give rise to their Lord of Night. Perhaps they didn't have enough bodies, or maybe someone like Marika and the Greater Will intervened to stop them. What we know for sure is that they tried and failed. Now I have a couple of mind-blowing speculation regarding what we have already established in the video. First is the number I told you to keep in your mind, 1,000 years. It's a number that seems to come up a lot when newly ascended gods talk about their order. Miquella and Ranni both mentions those numbers. Let's hear them together.
Now cometh the age of the stars. 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon. Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond.
I promise you, 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion.
A lot of people speculated that this is merely an estimate number, a number to signify a really long amount of time. But I believe this is not the case. Just like in Berserk, the incarnation ceremony happens every 1,000 years, and with every incarnation ceremony, a new order emerges. The newest one belongs to Griffith, and gave birth to the city of Falconia, which is basically Leyndell. For that, I believe every order is fated to last 1,000 years, and then causality would play its role and a new order will emerge. It's a fact that both Miquella and Ranni understood, while their mother thought that she can put an end to that. Ironically, what she first did was the cause of her fall. I'm talking about the removal of the Rune of Death. Just like a falling row of dominoes, the removal of the Rune of Death caused a chain reaction that would end Marika's reign. So I think Marika's reign lasted for 1,000 years. Placidusax as well. Of course, this is speculation and not a deal-breaking point, but I believe it may help a little with understanding the timeline of Elden Ring. Another point I want to talk about regarding the incarnation ceremony is another name to it. It's called the festival. This reminded me a lot of a huge mystery in Elden Ring, the festival that takes place in Dubanula village. A tradition said to be so old that the Golden Order must tolerate its existence, even though it's related to death, evident by killing and skinning people, as well as the presence of a godskin apostle. The theme of skinning corpses, as we said, is very important. Even in the story trailer, the corpses looks like they are skinned. Since the time the DLC was released, this have been bothering me. It seems there is something missing regarding the festival, a missing link. I believe we may have found it. The festival is a ceremony relating to the incarnation ceremony and the divine gates. A ceremony that was like a force of nature. Even the Golden Order couldn't stop it and must tolerate its existence. Even their weapons have the effect of generating runes with every hit. We already established that runes is connected to spiritual powers. That's why I think the festival is a natural phenomena connected to the coming and going of ages. Of course, it's not necessarily the same as Berserk. Miyazaki always twists things to his own vision, but it may be a valid explanation. The last point I want to talk about is about Placidusax. It's a very wild theory. Actually, I believe in the light of the DLC, Farum Azula needs to be revisited entirely. I will certainly make that video in the near future, so stay tuned. Now returning to the Dragon Lord, we know that he had a god that fled right? And as we established in the video, this god probably ascended because of some kind of an original divine gate. A lot of speculation have been going about the identity of the god Blasidisax. Me personally have been under the impression that it was a Glumite queen, but what if Blasidisax was actually his own god? Just like Marika, he was both a god and an Elden Lord. Blasidisax's two remaining heads are actually not identical. One is bigger and has sharper features, while the other is more soft. In an amazing video by Zuli the Witch, she reads the internal files for Blasidisax. She finds that one of his heads is male while the other is actually female, making Blasidisax a dual-gender divine rebis, just like Marika. So perhaps he didn't even need a god or a vessel for the Elden Ring. Maybe the divine gate of the ancient dragons made Blasidisax into a god and a vessel for the Elden Ring, just like Marika. But due to his dual nature, he was an Elden Lord as well, just like Radagon. In that context, he may have lost his divine part when Bale the Dread attacked him. Perhaps when he lost his other heads, he lost his divine part. We know Blasidisax was kind of dying, and we already said every 1,000 years a new age comes. Maybe at that point, the Greater Will decided that Blasidisax was done. It's also worth noting that Blasidisax is the only being in the lands between that uses the same golden fire of the Elden Beast. The only other creature that can produce something close is the ulcerated tree spirit, which explodes with golden fire. Perhaps this ability of Blasidisax was due to him being a vessel for the Elden Ring at a certain moment of time. This was some wild speculation on my part, so tell me what you think about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. If you want to know more about the similarities between Shadow of the Erdtree and Berserk, you can watch the video on the left side. It's an old video from before the DLC though, so only watch it for fun. While if you want to know the secret history of Godfrey, then watch the video on the right side. Until next time, farewell, fellow Tarnished.